Chapter 113 The House in the Allées de Meilan. 10 leagues were passed without a single word being pronounced. Morel was dreaming, and Monte Cristo was looking at the dreamer. "Morel," said the Count to him at length, "do you repent having followed me?" "No, Count, but to leave Paris." "If I thought happiness might await you in Paris, Morel, I would have left you there. Valentine reposes within the walls of Paris, and to leave Paris is like losing her a second time." "Maximilian," said the Count, "the friends that we have lost do not repose in the bosom of the earth, but are buried deep in our hearts, and it has been thus ordained that we may always be accompanied by them. I have 2 friends, who in this way never departed from me. One who gave me being, and the other who conferred knowledge and intelligence to me. Their spirits live in me. I consult them when doubtful, and if I ever do any good, it is to their good counsels that I am indebted. I listen to the voice of your heart, Morel, and ask whether you ought to preserve this melancholy exterior." "My friend," said Maximilian, "the voice of my heart is very sad, and promises only sorrow. It is ever thus that weakened minds see everything as though a black veil. The soul forms its own horizons. Your soul is darkened, and consequently the sky of the future appears stormy." "That may possibly be true," said Maximilian, and he again subsided into his thoughtful mood. The journey was performed with that marvelous rapidity which was one of the Count's sources of power. Towns fled from them like shadows on their path, and trees shaken by the first winds of autumn seemed like giants madly rushing on to meet them, and retreating as rapidly when once reached. The following morning they arrived at Chalon, where the Count's steamboat waited for them. Without an instant being lost, the carriage was placed on board, and the 2 travelers embarked without delay. The boat was built for speed. Her 2 paddle wheels resembled 2 wings with which she skimmed the water like a bird. Morel was not insensible to that sensation of delight which is generally experienced in passing rapidly through the air, and the wind, which occasionally raised the hair from his forehead, seemed on the point of dispelling momentarily the clouds collected there. As the distance increased between the travelers and Paris, and almost superhuman serenity appeared to surround the Count. He might have been taken from an exile about to revisit his native land. Ere long Marseille presented himself to the view. Marseille, white, warm, and full of life. Marseille, the younger sister of Tyre and Carthage, that has succeeded to them in the empire of the Mediterranean. Marseille, always the younger, the older she grows. Marseille was seen. Powerful memories were stirred within them by the sight of the Round Tower, the Fort St. Nicholas, the Hotel de Ville built by Puget, and the port with its quay of brick, where they had both gambolled as children, and it was with one accord that they stopped at the Cannebière. A vessel was setting sail for Algiers, on board of which the bustle usually attending departure prevailed. The passengers and their relations crowded on the deck, friends taking a tender but sorrowful leave for each other, some weeping, others noisy in their grief, formed a spectacle exciting even to those who witnessed similar ones daily, but which had not the power to disturb the current of thought that had taken possession of the mind of Maximilian from the moment he had set foot on the broad pavement of the quay. "Here," said he, leaning heavily on the arm of Monte Cristo, "here is the spot where my father stopped when the Pharaon entered the port. It was here that the good old man whom you saved from death and dishonor threw himself into my arms. I yet feel his warm tears on my face, and his were not the only tears shed, for many who witnessed our meeting wept also." Monte Cristo gently smiled and said, "I was there," at the same time pointing to the corner of the street. As he spoke, and in the very direction he indicated, a groan, expressive of bitter grief, was heard, and a woman was seen waving her hand to a passenger on board the vessel about to sail. She was closely veiled. Monte Cristo looked at her with an emotion that must have been remarked by Morel had not his eyes been fixed on the vessel. "Oh, heavens!" exclaimed Morel. "I don't deceive myself. That young man who is waving his hat, the youth in the uniform of a lieutenant, is Albert de Morcerf." "Yes," said Monte Cristo, "I recognize him." "How so? You are looking the other way." The Count smiled, as he was in the habit of doing when he did not want to make any reply, and he again turned his looks toward the veiled woman, who soon disappeared at the corner of the street, turning to his friend. "Dear Maximilian," said the Count, "have you nothing to do in this region?" "I have to weep over the grave of my father," replied Morel in a broken voice. "Well then, go. Wait for me there, and I will soon join you." "You leave me then?" "Yes, I also have a pious visit to pay." Morel allowed his hand to fall into that which the Count extended to him, then with an inexpressibly melancholy inclination of the head he quitted the Count, and bent his steps to the east of the city. Monte Cristo remained on the same spot until Maximilian was out of sight. He then walked slowly toward the Allées de Meilan to seek out the small house with which our readers must have been familiar at the commencement of this story. It yet stood under the shade of the fine avenue of lime trees, which formed one of the most frequent walks in the idlers of Marseille, covered with an immense vine, which spread its aged and blackened branches over the stone front, burned yellow by the ardent sun of the south. 2 stone steps, worn away by the friction of the feet, led to the door, made of 3 planks, which, owing to their never having made acquaintance with the paint or varnish, parted annually to reunite again when the damp season arrived. This house, with all its crumbling antiquity and apparent misery, was yet cheerful and picturesque, and was the same that the old Dante formerly inhabited, the only difference being that the old man occupied merely the garret, while the whole house was now placed at the command of Mercedes by the Count. The woman whom the Count had seen leave the ship with so much regret entered this house. She had scarcely closed the door after her when Monte Cristo appeared at the corner of the street, so that he found and lost her again almost at the same moment. The worn-out steps were the old acquaintance of his. He knew better than any one else how to open that weather-beaten door with a large-headed nail, which served to raise the latch within. He entered without knocking, or giving any other intimation of his presence, as if he had been the friend or the master of the place. At the end of the passage, paved with bricks, was seen a little garden, bathed in sunshine and rich in warmth and light. It was in this garden that Mercedes found in the place indicated by the Count the sum of money which he, through the sense of delicacy, intimated had been placed there 24 and 20 years previously. The trees of the garden were easily seen from the steps of the street door. Monte Cristo, on stepping into the house, heard a sigh, almost resembling a deep sob. He looked in the direction whence it came, and there, under an arbor of Virginian jasmine, with its thick foliage and beautiful long purple flowers, he perceived Mercedes seated with her head bowed and weeping bitterly. He had raised her veil, and with her face hidden by her hands, was giving free scope to these sighs and tears which had been so long restrained by the presence of her son. Monte Cristo advanced a few paces, which were heard on the gravel. Mercedes raised her head and uttered a cry of terror on beholding a man before her. "Madame," said the Count, "it is no longer in my power to restore you to happiness, but I offer you consolation. Will you deign to accept it coming as from a friend?" "I am, indeed, most wretched," replied Mercedes. "Alone in the world, I had but my son, and he has left me." "He possesses a noble heart, madame," replied the Count, "and he has acted rightly. He feels that every man owes a tribute to his country. Some contribute their talents, others their industry. Those devote their blood, and these their nightly labors, to the same cause. Had he remained with you, his life must have become a hateful burden, or would have he participated in your griefs. He will increase the strength and honor by struggling with adversity, which he will convert into prosperity. Leave him to build up the future for you, and I venture to say you will confide it to the safe hands. Oh, replied the wretched woman, mournfully shaking her head, the prosperity of which you speak, and which, from the bottom of my heart, I pray God in his mercy to grant him, and I shall never enjoy. The bitter cup of adversity has been drained by me to the very dregs, and I feel that the grave is not far distant. You have acted kindly, Count, in bringing me back to the place where I have enjoyed so much bliss. I ought to meet death on the same spot where happiness was once all my own. Alas, said Monte Cristo, your words sear and embitter my heart, the more so as you have every reason to hate me. I have been the cause of all your misfortunes, but why do you pity instead of blame me? You render me still more unhappy. Hate you, blame you. You, Edmond, hate, reproach the man that has spared my son's life, for was it not your fatal and sanguinary intention to destroy the son of whom Monsieur de Morcerf was so proud? Oh, look at me well, and discover, if you can, even the semblance of a reproach in me. The Count looked up, and fixed his eyes on Mercedes, who, partly rising from her seat, extended both her hands toward him. Oh, look at me, continued she, with a feeling of profound melancholy. My eyes no longer dazzled by their brilliancy, for the time has long fled since I used to smile on Edmond Dantès, who anxiously looked out for me from the window of yonder garret, then inhabited by his old father. Years of grief have created an abyss between those days and the present. I neither reproach you nor hate you, my friend. Oh no, Edmond, it is myself that I blame, myself that I hate. Oh, miserable creature that I am, cried she, clasping her hands and raising her eyes to heaven. I once possessed piety, innocence, and love, and three ingredients of happiness of angels, and the wretch that I am, I have doubted God. Monte Cristo approached her, and silently took her hand. No, said she, withdrawing it gently. No, my friend, touch me not. You have spared me, yet of all those who have fallen under your vengeance, I was the most guilty. They were influenced by hatred, by avarice, and by self-love. But I was the base, for, wanting of courage, acted against my judgment. Nay, do not press my hand, Edmond. You are thinking of some kind expression, I am sure, to console me, but do not bestow it on me, for I am no longer worthy of kindness. See, and she exposed her face completely to view. See, misfortune has silvered my hair, my eyes have shed so many tears that they are encircled by a rim of purple, and my brow is wrinkled. You, Edmond, on the contrary, you are still young, handsome, dignified. It is because you have had faith, because you have had strength, because you trusted in God, and he has supported and strengthened you in all your trials. I have been cowardly, I have denied, abandoned God, and look at me now. As Mercedes spoke, tears chased each other down her warm cheeks. The unhappy woman's heart was breaking, as memory recalled the changeful events of her life. Monte Cristo, however, took her hand and imprinted a kiss on it, but she herself felt that it was no greater warmth than he could have bestowed one on the hands of some marble statue of a saint. There are predestined existences, continued she, in which a first fault destroys the prospects of a whole life. I believed you dead. Why did I survive you? What good has it done to me to mourn for you internally in the secret recesses of my heart, only to make a woman of 39 look like 150 years of age? Why, having recognized you, and I the only one to do so, why was I able to save my son alone? Ought I not also to have rescued the man I had accepted for a husband, guilty though he were? Yet I let him die. What do I say? O merciful heavens! Was I not accessory to his death by my supine insensibility, my contempt for him, not remembering, or not willing to remember, that it was for my sake he had become a traitor and a perjurer? In what am I benefited by accompanying my son so far, since I now abandon him, and allow him to depart alone in the baneful climate of Africa. Oh, I have been base, cowardly, I tell you. I have abjured my affections, and, like all renegade, I am of evil omen to those who surround me. No, Mercedes, said Monte Cristo. No, you judge yourself with too much severity. You are a noble-minded woman. It was your grief that disarmed me. Still, I was but an agent, led on by an invisible and offended deity, who chose not to withhold the fatal blow that I was destined to hurl. I take that God to witness, at whose feet I have prostrated myself daily for the last 10 years, that I would have sacrificed my life to you, and with my life, the projects that were indissolubly linked with it. But, and I say it with some pride, Mercedes, God required me, and I lived. Examine the past and the present, and endeavor to dive into futurity, and then say whether I am not a divine instrument. The most dreadful misfortunes, the most frightful sufferings, the abandonment of all those who loved me, the persecution of those who did not know me, formed the trials of my youth, when suddenly, from captivity, solitude, misery, I was restored to light and liberty, and became the possessor of a fortune so brilliant, so unbounded, so unheard of, that I must have been blind not to be conscious that God has endowed me with it to work out his own great designs. From that time, I viewed this fortune as confided to me for a particular purpose. Not a thought was given to a life which you once, Mercedes, had the power to render blissful. Not 1 hour of peaceful calm was mine, but I felt myself driven on like an exterminating angel, like those adventurous captains about to embark on some enterprise full of danger. I laid my provisions, I loaded my arms, I collected every means of attack and defense. I inured my body to the most violent exercises, my soul to the bitterest trials. I taught my arms to slay, my eyes to behold excruciating sufferings, and my mouth to smile at the most horrible spectacles. From good-natured, confiding, and forgiving, I became revengeful, cunning, and wicked, or rather immovable as fate. Then I launched out into the path that was open to me. I overcame every obstacle. I reached the goal, but woe to those who met me in my career. Enough, said Mercedes. Enough, Edmond. Believe me that she who alone recognized you has been the only one to comprehend you, and had she crossed your path, and you had crushed her like a frail glass, still, Edmond, still she must have admired you. Like the gulf between me and the past, there is an abyss between you, Edmond, and the rest of mankind. I tell you freely that the comparison I draw between you and other men will ever be one of my greatest tortures. No, there is nothing in the world to resemble you in worth and goodness. But we must say farewell, Edmond, and let us part. Before I leave you, Mercedes, have you no request to make? Said the Count. I desire but one thing in the world, Edmond, the happiness of my son. Pray to the Almighty to spare his life, and I will take upon myself to promote his happiness. Thanks, Edmond. But have you no request for yourself, Mercedes? For myself I want nothing. I live, as it were, between two graves, the one that of Edmond Dantès, lost to me long, long since. He had my love. That word ill becomes my fated lip now, and it is a memory dear to my heart, and one that I would not lose for all that the world contains. The other grave is that of the man who met his death from the hand of Edmond Dantès. I approve of the deed, but I must pray for the dead. Your son shall be happy, Mercedes, repeated the Count. Then I shall enjoy as much happiness as this world can possibly confer. But what are your intentions? Mercedes smiled sadly. To say that I shall live here, like Mercedes of the other times, gaining my bread by labor, would not be true, nor would you believe me. I have no longer the strength to do anything but to spend my days in prayer. However, I shall have no occasion to work, for the little sum of money buried by you, and which I found in the place you mentioned, will be sufficient to maintain me. Rumor will probably be busy respecting me, my occupations, my manner of living. That will signify but little. That concerns God, you, and myself. Mercedes, said the Count, I do not say it to blame you, but you made an unnecessary sacrifice in relinquishing the whole of the fortune amassed by Monsieur de Morcerf. Half of it, at least, by right belonged to you, in virtue of your vigilance and economy. I perceive what you are intending to propose to me, but I cannot accept it, Edmond. My son would not permit it. Nothing shall be done without the full approbation of Albert de Morcerf. I will make myself acquainted with his intentions, and will submit to them. But if he be willing to accept my offer, would you oppose them? You well know, Edmond, that I am no longer a reasoning creature. I have no decision, unless it be never to decide. I have been so overwhelmed by the many storms that have broken over my head, that I have lost the will to do so. I am in the hands of the Almighty, like a sparrow in the talon of an eagle. I live because it is not ordained for me to die. If succor be bent to me, God wills it, and I will accept it. Ah, madame, said Monte Cristo, you should not talk thus. God wishes us to comprehend him and discuss his power. It is for this that he has given us a free will. Alas, exclaimed Mercédès, speak not so. If I believed that I possessed a free will, it would drive me to despair. Monte Cristo dropped his head and shrank from the vehemence of her grief. Will you not even say you will see me again? He asked. On the contrary, we shall meet again, said Mercédès, pointing to heaven with solemnity. I tell you so to prove to you that I still hope. And after pressing her own trembling hand upon that of the Count, Mercédès rushed up the stairs and disappeared. Monte Cristo slowly left the house and turned toward the quay. But Mercédès saw not his departure, though she was seated at the little window of the room which had been occupied by old Dante. Her eyes were straining to see the ship which was carrying her son over the vast sea, but still her voice involuntarily murmured softly, "Edmond."